Welcome to all. Today's session in English literature is all about the scholar Gipsy. The objectives in today's lessons are to analyze and interpret the scholar Gipsy, to explore the paraphrase in the poem, and to study Victorian literature in the words of Arnold through his scholar Gipsy. Here we are with the introduction of the poet. Arnold was the eldest son of Thomas Arnold. He was an influential educator who served as headmaster of Rugby School for a number of years. Arnold himself attended the school from 1837 to 1841. While he was a student here, he composed the prize-winning poem Alaric at Rome, published in 1840. After graduating from Balliol College at Oxford in 1844, Arnold accepted a teaching post at the university. He continued to write verse, publishing The Strayed Reveller and other poems in 1849. 2 years later, he was appointed Inspector of Schools, a position he held until shortly before his death. Arnold focused his energies on poetry until 1853. For the remaining 35 years of his literary career, Arnold wrote numerous essays and reviews on literary, educational, and cultural issues. His controversial perspective on Christianity provoked the outrage of conservative politicians and religious thinkers. He died of heart failure on April 15, 1888. His famous works are New Poems, Cromwell, a prize poem, Culture and Anarchy, and Essays on Criticism. Mathew Arnold is the greatest elegiac poet in English literature. Milton has written Lycidas, and that is the only elegy to his credit. Shelley has written Adonais, a great elegy. Tennyson's In Memoriam and Break, Break, Break are no doubt memorable elegies. But Arnold's entire poetic corpus is elegiac. He is unmistakably elegiac and profoundly melancholic in nature. This melancholic note existed in all his poems. Even his love poems are the elegies on the death of love. His melancholy is as much cosmic as personal. He found life to be a matter of boredom, frustration, and unending weariness. His elegies are the outlet of grief-stricken soul. Elegies have a wide variety. They were mostly of the pastoral type. The term pastoral is derived from Latin pastor, meaning a shepherd. Arnold is considered one of the most significant writers of the late Victorian period in England. He initially got reputed as a poet of elegiac verse. Poems as The Scholar Gipsy and Dover Beach are considered classics for their subtle, restrained style and compelling expression of spiritual malaise. However, it was through his prose writing that Arnold asserted his greatest influence on literature. The Scholar Gipsy is a poem by Mathew Arnold written in the year 1853. It is based on a 17th century Oxford story which is found in Joseph Glanville's The Vanity of Dogmatizing in the year 1661. The poem The Scholar Gipsy first appeared in a volume which is titled Poems in 1853. Arnold first thought to title it The First Mesmerist. He went through Glanville's Vanity of Dogmatizing in 1845 and since then had seriously been thinking of writing a poem on the Scholar Gipsy, and the material for this had been gathered from Glanville's work. The Scholar Gipsy was written in 1853, probably immediately after Sohrab and Rustum. In a letter written to his brother Tom in 1857, referring to their friendship with Theodore Walron and the poet Arthur Hugh Clough, Arnold wrote that the scholar Gipsy was meant to fix the remembrance of those delightful wanderings of ours in the Cumner Hills before they were quite effaced. On May 15, 1857, Arnold wrote in a letter to his brother Tom, "You alone of my brothers are associated with that life at Oxford, the freest, the most delightful part, perhaps, of my life. When, with you and Clough and Walron, I shook off the bonds and formalities of the place and enjoyed the spring of life and that unforgotten Oxfordshire and Berkshire country. Do you remember a poem of mine called The Scholar Gipsy? It was meant to fix the remembrance of those delightful wanderings of ours in the Cumner Hills, the freedom, youth, and carefree wandering to which Arnold refers are personified in the image of the scholar Gipsy, the central figure of the poem. The late Romantics were longing for nostalgia, but to them, imagination, creativity, and nature mattered more. Arnold's poem is heavily based on a nostalgic story about a scholar who takes up with a band of gypsies in order to learn all about the ancient art of traditional knowledge, which is based on the power of imagination. Throughout the poem, he makes an account of the rumors that the gypsy scholar is seen from time to time in the area. It makes the reader believe that the gypsy scholar stands as a metaphor for traditional knowledge. He was unappreciated by many when the Industrial Revolution was at its full swing. Perhaps the glimpses of him is a suggestion of hope that the respect and passing down of traditional knowledge or imagination has not been lost. Arnold imagines the gypsy scholar as a shadowy figure and a wonderful description of the view of traditional knowledge. He even claimed to have seen it once himself. He entertains the thought of the gypsy scholars still being alive after 2 centuries, but shakes off the thought. He cannot have died. This is a hopeful statement where the poet reveals his belief that imagination is still alive, waiting to be found. Arnold is dull about the materialism of the Victorian age. His reflections focus around a character called the scholar Gipsy. Arnold was a moralist. He was attracted towards the story of scholar Gipsy and made a severe criticism of the Victorian life. In a sense, the scholar Gipsy became Arnold's objective correlative. The poet exhorts a shepherd to look after his bleating sheep. They are to be let loose from their folds to enable them to feed on grass in the fields. The poet is along with his companion. The shepherd is engaged throughout the day and is in quest of the scholar Gipsy. Some critics have identified the companion of the poet as Arnold's friend Arthur Hugh Clough. The poet waits for his companion in a shady corner of a field. The voices of the reapers will be heard in different parts of the fields. The sweet musical sounds of the spring bring delight to the poet. Arnold has arranged for a companion, the shepherd, who comes at sunset. The poet reclines on the soft grass under the shady trees. They seem to protect him from the bright and piercing rays of the sun. He gets delighted to inhale the perfume of the lime trees which are shaken by the wind. The poet has a book entitled Vanity of Dogmatizing next to him. There is the story of the scholar Gipsy in that book, and the poet reads it with great interest. It deals with a scholar at Oxford who had talents and creative imagination. Unable to find any scope, he left his Oxford friends one summer morning. He kept the company of the gypsies and wanted to learn from them the art of thought reading, which is technically known as hypnotism. People found him in the company of wild brotherhood and thought that he had spoiled his career. He did not return to his friends and the university. One day, the scholar Gipsy came across two of his Oxford friends. He told them all about what he had learnt and said that he needed moments of divine illumination in order to be a thorough master of his subject. He then left. There were rumors that he was occasionally seen in that area, moving about in thoughtful, silent and melancholic mood. He wore the strange garments of the gypsies. Shepherds claimed that they have seen on the Hurst near Oxford. He was also seen in a lone alehouse. The uneducated rustic folk saw him. The scholar Gipsy, unused to the noise, suddenly left the alehouse. He was not happy in the human company. The poet seems to recall the distressed looks of the scholar Gipsy. The poet has engaged many shepherds to search for the scholar Gipsy and gave them his facial features. He wistfully looks at the Cumner Hills and expects to find the scholar Gipsy. Once, some Oxford people saw him crossing the Thames at Bablock Heath. He was looking sad and had a store of flowers on his lap that he might have plucked from the fields of Wychwood Bowers. He feasted his eyes sumptuously on the beauty of nature but did not speak to anyone. Girls who have danced at the Fifield Elm in May claim to have seen him often in the dark fields in the evening. Often he gave these flowers to the girls but never spoke to them. In June, during hay time, bathers saw him sitting upon the river bank overspread with all kinds of plants. The scholar, a man of delicate health, had worn the strange dress of a gypsy. He had dreamy eyes and manners and looked like the one who had been restricted from all things. When the bathers returned, they were astonished to have seen that the scholar had vanished. He was then seen in the farmhouses in the Cumner Hills. In autumn, the scholar Gipsy was seen near the Bagley Wood. The gypsies spread their ragged clothes on the trees and plants for drying them. Their multicolored garments looked bright. He was looking a part of nature. The blackbirds flying around to get their crumbs of food were not frightened at his presence. At times he moved with a withered twig. He was all the while waiting for the divine illumination. The poet had seen him in the winter. He was wrapped himself with his old loose outer garment and fought against the snow to continue his journey to Hindsey. He climbed the top of the hill and looked at the Christ Church Hall, which was looking luminous on a festive occasion. Then he made his straw bed and retired to an isolated granary. The poet is suddenly disillusioned. He wonders that he must have dreamt of the scholar Gipsy who died 200 years ago. Glanville wrote about him in his Vanity of Dogmatizing. It is impossible for a man to live so long. He must have been buried in a secluded country churchyard, where his grave must have been overgrown with tall trees and wild flowers. The scholar Gipsy may not be seen in flesh and blood, but as he was a dream figure and as an idealist, he has no death. The poet says that life of human being is a prolonged exercise in the quality of uselessness. The scholar Gipsy, on the other hand, lived a more fruitful and useful life. He had a spiritual quest. He is therefore immortal. Had he lived like the Victorians, he would have died long ago. The Victorians are destined to die physically and spiritually as well. But the scholar Gipsy was not born to die. Old age cannot wither him. All this is because of his strong determination. He did not waste his powers and energy in idle occupations. He just waited for the divine spark. The Victorians never seriously thought about religion. Their faith was casual. They would launch an experiment today and shun it tomorrow. Even the wisest of the Victorians has suffered very much. To a Victorian, life is a nightmare. He is neither happy nor serene. The scholar Gipsy must live a secluded life. His inspiration will guide him. He should draw strength from the lovely objects of nature. He should move about in the moonlight when no one can disturb him. He should listen to the warbling of the nightingale from the garden full of fresh and perfumed flowers. The poet stresses on his quest to the scholar Gipsy to avoid the company of the Victorians who suffer from the incurable diseases of materialism and skepticism. He may lose his strength, vision, hope and buoyancy of spirit if he moves with them. He may die like Victorians. He advises the scholar Gipsy to ignore the greetings and smiles of the Victorians, which are deceptive. The grave Phoenician or the Tyrian trader was the undisputed leader of the mercantile world. He once was passing in his merchant vessel across the Mediterranean Sea. The new ship belonged to the merry Greek, and his merchandise consisted of the articles of luxury rather than of necessity. The trader was hostile to the Greek and did not stop to welcome him. The merchant grew impatient. He seized their rudders and sailed away without rest to avoid the company of the merry Greek merchant. He finally reached and unloaded his bales of cloth merchandise before the dark Spaniards. Arnold was a representative poet. The poetry of Mathew Arnold differs from the poetry of all the later English poets in several important particulars. When he is at his best, his poetry is so good, not merely in the kind that it is shown, but in every kind it is luminous, so lovely and so noble that one cannot regret there is not more of it. The charm of a poem like The Scholar Gipsy is indescribable, as we can find that many diverse poetical qualities are interfused therein. The poem is pastoral, and it is filled with glimpses of English rural scenery, which, beautiful everywhere, are exquisite in the neighbourhood of Oxford. It is flooded with personal feelings which flow from the loveliness of nature or from the mind of the poet. The Scholar Gipsy is a vision of perfect landscapes of England. The meditative poetry of Arnold has been estimated by those who accept and by those who reject meditative poetry. It is melancholic, but not misanthropical, certainly not cynical. It is profoundly serious, and its morality is of the highest, and one feels it in reading it that the poet was greater than his poetry. Arnold has borrowed his materials from Joseph Glanville's Vanity of Dogmatizing. The scholar is created as a symbol of spiritual quest and materialism. He is shown as a vision of infinite truth and therefore becomes immortal. The charm of the Scholar Gipsy lies partly in the subject and partly in the scene. Arnold's setting is related to an urbanized Oxford countryside, and one does not expect an idyllic atmosphere. The poet has introduced a shepherd in the poem and has dismissed him at the earliest opportunity. But he himself is not a shepherd. The poet is a person who is in quest of the Scholar Gipsy. Arnold has no occasion to idealize the setting of the poem. They are scenes all seen by him. They are scenes of nature by an educated Englishman. In the description of varied beauty of nature, Arnold is remarkably romantic. The Scholar Gipsy shows us a store of flowers to the girls who have gathered to dance around the five-field elm. As an excellent pictorial artist, Arnold presents a perfumed morning. A reader can visualize the sheep crossing the strips of moon-blanched green. Repeat, we cannot but smell the scent of lindens. He describes the beauty and delicacy and affluence of color, the fragrance and freedom of wings of winds. The lucid air, the spring, and the stream of flowing water enlarge and exalt the pressure and power of the whole poem. When it comes to the versification of the poem, the metrical skill and versification receive special mention. It is written in stanzas of 10 lines, each line being an iambic pentameter except the sixth, which is trimester. The power of Arnold has been challenged and proved to be the strongest and enabled him to supply by poetic craftsmanship his deficiency in natural magic. The compound words used in the Scholar Gipsy are Keynesian and have heightened its beauty. For example, close-lipped patience, green muffled hills, air-swept lindens, heaven-sent moments, etc. The Scholar Gipsy is a criticism of life. Here Arnold means interpretation of life, life as it is. Like Sophocles, Arnold seeks to see life steadily and see it whole. This sort of life is not found in Victorian England. The Victorians have no ideals or aims in life. They fight, but they do not know what they fight for. The Scholar Gipsy, on the other hand, has one aim, one business and one desire. According to Arnold, one cannot hope to attain good for himself or for mankind by mere external aids. Philosophical preaching is needed. The scholar Gipsy has been waiting for divine spark. Thus it is true that the secret of noble life is within us. It is to be well remembered while reading the scholar Gipsy that Arnold has drawn upon Glanville, but the real subject of the poem is not the mesmeric powers of the scholar Gipsy, but of the materialistic Victorian age. Victorian age was the age of sickness. The scholar Gipsy of Glanville has been given a new character in Arnold's work. He becomes the symbol of idealism and quest for truth. Mathew Arnold's poems are filled with romantic concepts. He is a poet of classicism and he cooperates dominant romantic elements in his poems. His poems have appealing qualities which are unique because of its romantic blend. The real interesting fact in his poems is the delineation of pastoral setting which takes us far away to an enchanting world. The poem Scholar Gipsy is full of romantic splendor. The pastoral and its nature offer words worthier romantic setting. Arnold casts his material in the pastoral mood and gives away to his pensive reflection under the image of shepherd. Obviously, the beauty around the Oxford University makes us visit there. The Cumner Hills with its snowflakes, skirts of Bagleywood and lone alehouse are described, and all these contribute to make up the romantic pastoral setting. Thus, the scene of nostalgia, accompanied by elegiac note, which is a major element of romanticism, echoes the whole poem. The scholar Gipsy is fed up with difficulties and worries of modern life. He leaves the material society and joins Gipsy lore. He would like to come back to this world to impart knowledge to the world. He is preoccupied with a single ideal. In the eyes of the world, he spends a solitary and pensive life. He is waiting for heaven-sent moments so as to achieve his aim. Thus, he stands as an ideal and mystic person. The life of scholar as shown in the poem is gloomy and dark. He is pensive and contemplated. The Oxford countryside with the solemnity of the hills, woods and glades is very much here. We can find the drink and clatter of the rustic in the ale house, the Oxford rider's blithe, the crossing of the ferry in the pond, the maidens coming to dance in the fair field, firm hands working hard, but these are all subordinated to the melancholic tone. Keeping all these in purview, Arnold is truly a romantic poet at heart, is all that we can say. Arnold places each episode of the poem precisely within a month or season, moving through spring, summer and autumn. The climax of the poem, exactly halfway through, is set in midwinter. It is the apex of the work, formally bringing together the three protagonists, the narrator, the scholar Gipsy and the university, topographically in a crucial encounter which repays close attention. Thank you, viewers. I hope you all have enjoyed The Scholar Gipsy written by Mathew Arnold.